Danganronpa.
Okay, final stretch, everybody. Here we go. Using the skeleton key, Kyoko and Makoto unlock the door and start climbing out of the garbage pit. Kyoko shares more about her life now that she remembers it. Her motive for meeting the headmaster, her father, wasn't some nice reunion. She sought him out to disown him to his face. It turns out the Kirigiri family is a family of detectives, so proud of their heritage that they keep to the shadows to never be caught. Kyoko had to give up some of that pride in order to be public enough to be scouted and called the ultimate detective. So why did she go so far to disown him? Well, it turns out her father, despite being seen as the next in line to head the family due to his genius, didn't enjoy detective work, basically blasphemy in the Kirigiri family. He cut off the rest of the Kirigiris, and once Kyoko's mom died, he just left, leaving her behind. Kyoko claims to not blame him for that, saying he had his own life to lead, but she does blame him for how the rest of the family viewed her. No matter how well she did, no matter how much talent she had, she was seen as the little girl abandoned by her father. As a way to free herself of that burden, she wants to sever all ties to him. Kyoko doubts this would hurt him, saying he probably forgot about her years ago. Makoto can't wrap his head around the idea of cutting off family so casually, so he mostly stays silent for the rest of the climb. Coming out through the hatch in front of the incinerator, Makoto wonders what the plan is. After all, they can't exactly hide from Monokuma forever. Kyoko says that if he's wondering if his survival is going to be a problem, they could just go ask the bear. Makoto decides to just trust Kyoko and hope it doesn't get him killed, a sentence that summarizes like 40% of this game. Finding Monokuma in the gym, he's angry that Makoto's still alive and prepares to kill him for good, at which point Kyoko says, sure, go ahead, but if you do, you're a loser. This causes Monokuma to pause, and Kyoko goes on to explain how they know that the last trial is a sham, an insult to the rules he lords over everyone else. Sure, she doesn't have evidence, but if Makoto really was guilty, wouldn't he be in hiding right now, afraid of punishment, instead of confronting Monokuma himself after escaping? Damn, Kyoko, are you sure you aren't the ultimate gambler? Monokuma asks if this display is supposed to convince him not to kill Makoto, and Kyoko says it's not him she's trying to convince. After all, after saying all that in front of the cameras, just killing Makoto would show the audience watching them right now that she was right, and Monokuma had no way of refuting her. It would show that in order to cause the despair he's trying to spread, he has to cheat, instead of letting it happen naturally among the students. After taking such great lengths to hijack the airwaves, there's a reason they had to broadcast this game. Cheating would kill whatever proof they're trying to make about despair inevitably crushing hope. Now the mastermind has to prove their innocence. Kyoko demands they redo Mukuro's class trial. No tricks, no nonsense, they get a fair shot this time. One last showdown between hope and despair. Monokuma agrees, but with one extra requirement. It wouldn't be enough to just prove who killed Mukuro. No, in order to prove that hope truly triumphs over despair, they're gonna have to uncover all the other secrets of their killing school life. Every last mystery must be solved if this is gonna be the end. By the way, he's making bear puns again, as what I can only call an FU. Kyoko says the quiet part out loud. If the students fail to do this, they'll all face execution. Monokuma doesn't technically admit to cheating, but he does admit that no matter the outcome of the last trial, the cause of it was for the same reason every other trial happens. When a student kills another student, a class trial is held. And according to the bear, Mukuro's trial was no exception. In the interest of fairness, Monokuma gives Kyoko and Makoto one vague hint. The killing game began with 16 participants, all of them high school students. And the only people to take a single step in Hope's Peak since the killing game began are those 16 students. With that, Monokuma kicks them out to begin brainstorming their punishments, and they leave to find the others. Finding them in the dining hall, it's a happy reunion. minus the fact that Makoto smells like, well, literal garbage. The other students let Makoto know that nothing new opened up after the trial, and Kyoko lets them know about how Makoto was never the Blackened, and the ground rules for this redo. It's a tall order, but with everyone working together, they're sure to win. Well, assuming working together is a good idea. Kyoko's worried about that little hint Monokuma gave, about how the 16 students are the only ones who have taken a single step in here since the killing game started. Lying so blatantly, considering they're investigating him, is risky, so on some level they have to believe this hint, or at least take it into consideration. And if that's true, then only one of the 16 students could have killed Mukuro, and the only ones remaining of the 16 are in this room. Of our 6 survivors, there is a chance one of them is the mastermind. Toko even points out the obvious. The ultimate despair is the ultimate despair. If they're an ultimate, then they're a student just like them. Makoto smartly argues that one of them can't be the mastermind, someone who have had to sneak off to control Monokuma based on the fact that they found the surveillance room, so they're in the school, and they will have noticed someone leaving that often. But what if some dialogue was pre-recorded? Monokuma often dominates the conversation, so what if he directed the flow so any response he gave would fit what was being said? Speak of the devil and he shall appear. Monokuma announces that for this final trial he has unlocked every door in the school. Everyone separates, choosing to investigate alone, though not completely out of distrust. Hina wants to prove her usefulness by finding key pieces of evidence. Hiro's just following everyone else's lead, and Kyoko reassures Makoto that investigating separately doesn't mean they can't help each other out. Makoto starts viewing it as a divide and conquer sort of thing. With that, he's alone, and it's time for one last investigation. Mukuro's Monokuma file hasn't changed. The days-old scars, the head wound, the knife stab, it's all real. In the data lab, we can finally open the Monokuma door. Aoi got there first, and we find, well, hey, what's this latch for? Makoto? You sure you don't want to check that out? Okay. Aoi randomly hits a button labeled Data Center, and we hear a familiar sound. It's Monokuma, and he starts speaking a lot like our favorite swimmer. Yep, this is the Monokuma control panel. Not that Aoi could tell that that's what was happening, since she can't actually see beyond what's in front of the bear. Considering the security monitors are in a separate room, it sounds like we have an answer to Kyoko's earlier question. Hey, you sure you don't want to take a look down there? Anyone? Okay. The moment Aoi and Makoto leave, the door locks behind them, with Monokuma immediately showing up. He BS's some excuse about not wanting people to get bored with him being unable to move if everyone's just wandering in and out of the room, making them realize that they could have easily caught the mastermind right then and there. Really? Actually, no, not really. The latch is locked from the inside, but still. Aoi leaves to share this information with everyone, and we continue investigating. In the headmaster's office, the class's roster, class number 78 apparently, shows where Kyoko got the Ultimate Despair title from. A note connected to Mukuro's profile from the headmaster, how she's connected to an entity called Ultimate Despair, and even the headmaster isn't sure if it's a person or a group she's in. It was the headmaster's hunch that she was dangerous. The note also says that despite all her time in Fenrir as a mercenary, she didn't have a single scar when she started class. I think it's about time we finally check out that second dorm room. What do you say? Or we could turn right back around, that sounds good too. On the second floor, we find the headmaster's personal room with Kyoko waiting. She's lamenting never being able to get into her dad's obvious secret room despite all the time she spent sneaking around in here. She knows it's controlled via a program on his computer but hasn't found any hints at a password. Makoto types in something that Kyoko didn't think of. Actually, no. Didn't want to think of. Her own name. Kyoko barely has time to tell Makoto to not feel bad when it doesn't work, when it does. It opens right up. Upset, she walks into the room, and awaiting the two of them is a suspiciously vibrant present. Opening it, Makoto finds what remains of Kyoko's father, complete with a skull with a far less stylized but eerily familiar crack in it. Well, this explains why Alter Ego's information about him suggested he was still here. Kyoko seems to accept this fact with nonchalance, but Makoto knows her too well by now. He can see that her calm demeanor is a facade. After all, would someone really throw away their pride, as she phrased it, to face a man she didn't care about just to personally cut him off? Kyoko finds an old photo of Kyoko and her dad, and it sets her off. Seeing that he held on to this, the man she assumed had forgotten about her, she doesn't handle it well. I wanted to face him and tell him myself, she says. To cut him out of my life for abandoning me. And now he's abandoned me again. Has there ever been a worse father? Checking the nearby desk, Makoto finds the headmaster's e-handbook, which Kyoko says he should keep before asking him to leave. Apologizing, she says she just needs a moment alone. Makoto grants her that. With the e-handbook, Makoto's able to open some nearby lockers and finds something suspicious. In one locker, filled with already telling instruments, he finds a notebook with Hiro's name on it. In another, he finds a pocketbook talking about how the headmaster plans on turning Hope's Peak into a shelter, and how the writer confronted the headmaster, her father, about it directly. Scrawled on the last pages, it says there's a second to spare. At that moment, Monokuma then calls everyone to the gym for a hint. Passing Hiro, he seems afraid of Makoto running away before he can be asked about the locker. Monokuma's hint turns out to be a photo of Class 78, complete with Mukuro, and just like the ones before, it suggests that they all knew each other. Well, almost all of them. On closer inspection, Makoto notices he isn't in the photo. Makoto finds Hiro, Aoi, and Byakuya to ask them about it, but they're all acting strange and refuse to talk. Weird, but there's no time to dwell on it. Let's check out the old crime scene. Mukuro's body's already been taken from the garden, and Makoto double-checks the tarp. This time he notices a stamp on it, Biolab. Making our way there, oh god, Toko, not again. Though she did try her best this time, the reason she passed out is clear, with an open slot in what's apparently a makeshift morgue. Kyoko comes in to look at Mukuro's body. Remember, she could only glance at it at the last investigation while we look around. An instruction manual explains that when a body's put in one of the slots, a light turns on. There's 9 lights on right now. Wait, 9? According to Kyoko, the stomach and head wounds are post-mortem, leaving the multiple scars as the only pre-death wounds. But aren't those several days old? Makoto asks Kyoko, who didn't take the bait on Monokuma's hints by the way, about the pocketbook. Kyoko confirms it's her handwriting and distraught gives Makoto a DVD, wondering if it means that that video was real too. In the AV room, been a while, huh? It turns out that that video is a series of clips by the headmaster asking the class one by one if they'd accept living in the school until they die. Despite everything, they all say yes. Well, all the ones we get to see. Monokuma pulls the plug and blames it on a malfunction before Makoto can see every clip. Makoto's ready to accept that, but Kyoko might not be the only one whose memories were tampered with. With that, Monokuma comes on and calls everyone for the final class trial. The one that will be the end, in one way or another. While waiting for Monokuma, Makoto notices that the atmosphere is tense. Despite knowing their common enemy, it's more reminiscent of the first trial, with everyone suspecting everyone else. Everyone gets on the elevator, and as it descends, we get a top-down view as usual, knowing just how far we've come, and just how many people we've lost. The door opens to reveal a dreary trial site. Monokuma announces he'll be sitting in that vacant 16th seat instead of his usual post, and we prepare for the end. Due to how intense this final trial is going to be, I'm going to discuss the investigation here before we get into this thing. Anyway, damn, that was a lot, right? I really like this final investigation, since while technically every investigation could be done in a random order, kind of, until you get to Monokuma's hint, it feels, I don't know, less scripted than the others. Probably because you have multiple goals here. Finding out Mukuro's true killer, uncovering the mastermind. Yes, I view those as two separate goals, even if they are the same answer. And solving every remaining mystery. Unlike before, where you've had the single goal of uncovering the black end, you have choice here. Every door is unlocked. Finally, I can go to the second floor of the dorms. Or the biolab if you have recency bias, or maybe you want to go to the garden to double check the crime scene, or maybe you found your fellow classmates to try to work with them for a while. There's a variety. Speaking of that last point though, there is one grievance I have during this section, and it's unsurprisingly the hatch. I was so annoyed by this damn thing that even before I replayed the game for the video, I simply put that fucking hatch in my notes for this chapter. Yep, I had to rewrite chapter 3, and a hatch can still piss me off. It's borderline comical how important the hatch clearly is, but the game just doesn't let you engage with it at all. I mean, it does, but the reason Makoto isn't at least trying to open it boils down to the game says so, screw you. It's not quite as infuriating as the Kyoko debacle from chapter 4, but it is annoying, especially once you realize the mastermind was down there. Personally, the way I would have done it is by cheating. Make the hatch blend more into the floor, and if possible, I don't know if this is possible, make it so it doesn't show up when searching for checkable objects. But make it so you can investigate it anyway if you specifically select it. Then have Makoto or Aoi try the hatch and realize it's locked. Bam, there you go. Other than that though, yes, this really was distracting me that much, shut up, I don't see anything wrong with this investigation. Now, it's time to end this. Hiro actually comes out swinging with a good question. He asks if the mastermind is really one person.
Don't bother. I already know the answer. You're all the mastermind, aren't you? You're all out to get me!
And he ruined it. He's not fully to blame though, as Aoi and Byakuya start claiming the same thing. Makoto quickly deduces this is about Monokuma's hint, the photos. Everyone was given photos that excluded them, leading to panic. So does that mean that Monokuma was just lying about giving them a hint and that these are all just photoshopped? Well, maybe not. There's something off about these photos, but Makoto can't quite put his finger on it for now. He suggests to the class that they all have amnesia, bringing up interviews with the headmaster. The others are understandably disturbed at the idea that they consented to living here forever, but they have to push forward. Toko wonders how they were all given amnesia in the first place, to which Monokuma replies,
If I said it was hypnotism, would you believe me? Or we opened up your skulls and messed with your brains? Would you really believe anything I said? How it happened doesn't matter right now.
He's not wrong. Monokuma tells them to focus on the murder part of the trial. Before getting into the lost memories, the mastermind's goals, etc., he wants us to focus on Mukuro Ikusaba's murder. After all, Kyoko did request a retrial. Well, we know that the mastermind must be Mukuro's real murderer, plus we know that they're in this school. After all, we saw them on the Monokuma control room. We also know that Mukuro's fatal injury wasn't the head wound. It was the multiple scars on her body. Sure, they were made several days ago, but you know what that means? Her murder was several days ago. Toko argues that as the ultimate soldier, she probably already had those wounds, but remember her student profile? She had no wounds during her time as a student, much less several around her body. And if you're not getting all those scars from being a soldier, you're not getting them by just hanging out in a high school. Remember, this game takes place in Japan. I heard it when I said it, okay? So what about Makoto's little nighttime visitor? Well, that was the mastermind, wearing the same mask they later put on Mukuro's body to conflate the two. Monokuma starts acting like any blackened when cornered, saying all this is just an assumption. But we know it can't be. Mukuro's most obvious feature is the tattoo, and Makoto saw his attacker's bare hands. There was nothing there. Monokuma tries to turn it around, saying it could have been Kyoko, after all the others have alibis, but he already told us why it can't be her. Deciding that uncovering the mastermind's worth it, Kyoko takes off her gloves and shows off her hands. We don't see much, but the burnt red skin speaks volumes. Side note, this is unscripted off the top of the head. I know that Monokuma directly told us that she has scarred hands, and therefore we could have just said that instead of Kyoko having to show us something that clearly causes her a lot of issues. But I like to kind of imagine that when Monokuma popped in to reveal that she had scars out of pure spite, the camera wasn't focused on the room during the investigation, meaning that Kyoko was showing her hands more for the outside world watching than Monokuma. Honestly, that checks out, knowing her. Anyway, that proves that Kyoko didn't do it, and Monokuma finally admits that yes, the mastermind killed Mukuro. But the bargain was to uncover all secrets, and they still haven't figured out what happened. They know Mukuro died long before they found her, they know the cause of death was multiple wounds on her body, and based on the rules, which the murder still abides by based on the chat with Monokuma, it had to have happened during the killing game. But what even killed her? How did her body stay fresh that whole time? Luckily, that one's easy. Her body was stashed in the biolab. Hell, the tarp proves that her body was dragged to the garden directly from the biolab. Kyoko notes that Monokuma seems nervous now that they're talking about the biolab. There's something about that room that's stressing him out, and it makes sense. After all, there's an inconsistency. Despite Monokuma's attempts to distract Makoto, even bringing up his family from the first motive video, he notices the problem. There were 9 lights on in the lab, right? Meaning that there were 9 bodies, including Mukuro stashed there? But that can't be right, can it? We know how many people died. We're one off. But how's that possible? If the mastermind would just get rid of a body, why didn't they destroy Mukuro's? It was the most incriminating one for them. Well, what if we've been wrong this whole time about how many people have died? What if one person was killed twice? That would make the count 9, wouldn't it? What if before we found the body of Mukuro Ikusaba, we saw that same corpse as the body of someone else? It sounds crazy, but we know someone else whose fatal wounds would match Mukuro's. The one who let us know how dangerous Monokuma is. The outlier who wasn't connected to a trial. Junko Enoshima. Note to the Maya who's recording this, between the Fenrir tattoo and the godly spear Gungnir that killed her, that is a cruel irony I gotta respect. I think that I'm so clever for noticing that. There's 2 conclusions to draw from this. The first is that Mukuro, the mastermind, took Junko's body and presented it as her own. But I'm saying this one first so you know that's not it. The other possibility, the reality, is that we met Mukuro Ikusaba. She just called herself Junko, the ultimate fashionista. And then we watched Monokuma kill her. It's crazy, but it matches up. We saw Mukuro's student profile. Her measurements match up to the corpse, which, as we can see for ourselves in the student profile, match up to Junko's. We already knew Mukuro. We talked to her, ate with her. If you decided to hang out with her, you could have called her a friend. But she was a fake, calling herself Junko, likely covering her tattoo with makeup. And now she's dead, killed by the mastermind, the real Junko Enoshima. Monokuma laughs off the idea that Junko's his secret identity, but Makoto fires back, why did he try to shield the real one from the class? Monokuma pulled the plug on the interviews, remember? Makoto would have noticed that Junko's face looked different. And remember how we felt something off with the photos? Well, he figured it out. Take a look at Junko's face, or more specifically, the lack of one. In every photo, she was turned away from the camera, or her face was covered, and Mukuro's right there. Funny enough, being so obviously the Junko we met in hindsight, so they weren't just one and the same. Junko Enoshima is the mastermind behind this whole killing game, the ultimate despair. For whatever reason, she decided to set up her partner in crime to die early on, and later pin her death on Makoto. They solved the mystery, they figured it out, so it's over, right?
Over? Did you really think the story would end once we reached the climax of the case? Wrong! There's still plenty more to go!
Junko Enoshima, the real one, reveals herself, and she is something.
We have been waiting so very long for peasants like you to appear. If you swear your fealty to us, we will reward you with half of the entire world. Have you made your choice? Will you serve under us?
Oh, did you think I was being serious? Sorry, I was just messing with you.
Makoto recognizes her instantly from her magazine covers. Guess Mukuro really was BSing about that Photoshop, huh? Yeah, Junko admits that there's only so much someone can do to look like a different person, even if that person is your twin. I'm sorry, you're what? Yep, Junko didn't just kill her ally, she killed her own twin sister. Side note, she glosses over them having different last names by saying the reason for that is boring. In fact, she says that about a lot of things. She fully admits that the different personas she's been cycling through are the result of her quickly getting bored with herself. Junko admits the whole Mukuro pretending to be her thing. For the killing game to function, someone had to be controlling everything from Monokuma to the cameras, and according to Junko, Mukuro wasn't bright enough to pull that off, so she had Mukuro join the class. Of course, the ultimate soldier being in a killing game would set off all kinds of alarm bells, so she took Junko's fashionista/gyaru talents to come off as less threatening. But Mukuro wasn't the best at playing the role. It's been a while, but if you remember, Junko was one of the more assertive students, something that could be written off with her original talent of gyaru, but the way she would occasionally take charge was, well, a little militaristic in hindsight. And hell, during her free time events, she doesn't even bother hiding her nostalgic love of rations and the fact that she's had a rough life. So, Junko killed her. She used her as an example to the others on top of, there it is again, avoiding getting bored by shaking things up. Makes her final lines a bit more interesting, huh? The class is horrified that Junko's just casually talking about betraying her own sister, but she says that as the ultimate despairs, she and Mukuro don't care about anything. Life has always been suffering for them, so dying and killing are as normal as breathing to them. Killing Mukuro did upset Junko a little, but that fact makes her excited. She envies the pain and confusion that Mukuro must have felt as she realized her own sister had betrayed her, and just as a lesson to the others. If you haven't figured it out by now, Junko Enoshima isn't exactly someone you can reason with. Now that Mukuro's murder has been completely solved, it's finally time to move on to the rest of the mysteries, so how about that group amnesia? Also, I'd like to have a talk with whoever had Bryce Papenbrook say, damn straight. We all know that Junko, Monokuma, whatever, simply wants despair. She's been saying that since chapter 1. She says that the best way to nourish despair is hope, to bring you to an all-time high so you have further to fall. By removing their memories, she gave them that hope. What hope, you might ask? The hope of leaving the school. If they had their memories, as their interview with the headmaster suggests, they'd want to stay here. But what the hell is going on outside that they wouldn't want to leave? Well, Junko decides to show them. What the hell? How is any of this possible? No one knows, no one remembers. Well, almost no one. Toko's able to coax Jill to the front. Turns out that while Toko's memories were wiped, Jill's never were. She recalls what she's seeing on the screens as the tragedy, and it's implied that she never realized that the others lost their memories. Makes sense. While I snarked about Jill fronting for most of the game, Toko canonically is the host of the system, so she's usually out more. Jill explains that the tragedy happened about a year ago. She describes it as something man-made, but had the same impact as a natural disaster, something that caused the end of the world. As for what exactly it was, I don't know, ask Toko about it. Yep, since Jill wasn't exactly there for most of it, she can't exactly describe what happened outside the fact that even she was disturbed by how the world turned out. Junko refuses to explain further, and when Byakuya calls her ridiculous, she basically goes, "Oh, you think that's ridiculous?" The tragedy caused a lot of destruction, and it turns out that Byakuya's whole family got caught up in it. Every other Togami, even distant relatives, were wiped out in what was clearly a targeted effort. Byakuya breaks at this. After all, the Togami Corporation, his legacy was supposed to be untouchable. But once the tragedy broke out a year ago, their status didn't matter. Plus, legacy or not, Byakuya was just told that his entire family is dead and has been dead for a while. But wait, Makoto says, that's impossible. That couldn't have happened a year ago. After all, everything was fine when they walked into Hope's Peak a few weeks ago. Makoto, honey, you've been doing so well. Have you not been paying attention to the words coming out of your own mouth? Did you ignore Jill also saying the tragedy happened a year ago? I mean, Toko offhandedly wonders if the gaps in their memories are just around their entrance exams, but after knowing you have amnesia and looking at those photos where you clearly did a lot of activities together, are you really that surprised that your personal timeline doesn't add up? Makoto redeems himself by figuring out that the amount of time lost is their entire time at Hope's Peak. Turns out they've been going to school together for 2 years before their memories were wiped. That would explain Hiro's notebook and Kyoko's pocketbook. The moment they fainted was actually the point their amnesia started, wiping out everything between that time and them waking up in the school. Kyoko wonders what the ultimate despair is. There's no way 2 sisters could cause all this. Junko semi-agrees. She and Mukuro started it, but the despair from that moment spread like a disease. Everyone became infected by it, and the collective despair of it caused the world to collapse. That infectious despair affected the school too, and by the end of it, the 78th class, this class, were the only survivors. The headmaster went through with his plans to make the school a shelter. Despite his hesitations about Mukuro, he wasn't going to just leave one of his remaining students behind. Between that and not knowing that Junko was also in ultimate despair, he unwittingly trapped himself and the class in with the cause of all this. Not that the students knew any better, they were the ones who boarded up the windows with the help of their future tormentor. Though Junko and Mukuro didn't just board them all in, they helped them survive. They made sure that their class survived the end of the world just for this moment. Just for them to kill each other, and just in case they managed to unveil all their secrets, they'd feel the despair of knowing that the girls they once called their friends put them there. Yep, they, or at least Junko, thought this far ahead. But what's the motive? Why would they trigger the end of the world and then turn their attention onto their classmates? Simple. They're not just their classmates. They're Hope's Peak Academy students, the hope of future generations. I compared the school to Harvard at the start, but it is so much more than that. Imagine if you opened your phone right now to see news of every young scholar, every famous innovator, every teenage Nobel Prize winner, every young author, and hell, a whole bunch of our favorite up-and-coming celebrities were hunting each other for sport. And you got to see it on video. Between that and the state of the world right now, would you really think that's worth it to do anything? Why bother when the people genuinely determined to make this world a happier place to live in are doing that to each other? That's what Junko hoped to accomplish by broadcasting this killing game to the world after it already ended, to hunt down every remaining speck of hope and crush it. People came to save them, obviously, but remember all the weapons, the Gungnir, the Gatling gun? Turns out she had some outside the building too. Yeah, that sound the hero heard at the beginning, the construction, it wasn't construction. This was the final straw. Hiro, Alines, even Jill joined Byakuya in their despair. They were props to bring an already ruined world to further ruin. Manipulated by a former friend, made to kill each other in the hopes of escaping into a world that already ended. Everyone who's died up to this point has died for nothing. But were they really? Makoto points out that they haven't actually seen the outside world with their own eyes. For all they know, Junko could be screwing with them. This seems to surprise Junko. She drops the theatrics for what seems to be the real her. She goes back after a second, but it proves one thing: she can be shaken. Junko says that they'd die as soon as they leave the school, but Makoto says that even if that's true, even if every word she said is the truth, he refuses to give in to despair. Junko makes a showing of seeming to not care, saying it's time to vote. Yep, that still exists. This is a trial, after all. Obviously, they can't vote for the killer. They knew going into this that it was a mastermind, so what are they voting for? Well, hope versus despair. Junko lays out the conditions. They will be voting on which will be punished as usual. If they all vote for despair, aka her, then they'll go on with her own execution just as she promised as Monokuma. In the process, she'll shut down the air purifier in the lab. Remember that thing? Turns out it's important. Unsurprisingly, considering it's the apocalypse, the outside air is less than ideal. With the purifier off and the door open, the students will be forced out of the building. But if even one person votes to punish Hope, represented by Makoto after some last-minute spite, he'll suffer his own execution. Everyone else, their punishment will be to live in the school forever. No more motives, no more murders. Just them in the school until the day they die of natural causes. Basically, risk death outside or sacrifice Makoto for assured peace. Makoto'd like to think that his friends wouldn't give in, but their faces say otherwise. And just to make sure Makoto's completely isolated, Junko pulls on Kyoko's daddy issues and asks if she could really betray her father by allowing the shelter to open up, guaranteeing the deaths of the last beacons of hope in the world. But even now, Makoto refuses to give up. His friends won't abandon him. They just need a little nudge to see that the situation's not hopeless. In a moment that, in my opinion, feels best if you solve it in reverse chronological order, Makoto reaches out to his friends one by one. Byakuya pretends to have not given in at all and says that since he is still alive, the Togami line isn't finished. Besides, he swore to bring down the mastermind, right? Jill's in now that Byakuya's in, yes, I will give a rewrite later, and says that she'll go with whatever's more interesting. Aoi knows that Sakura wouldn't want her to give in, and would tell her to face this harder path head on. Yeah, she would. Hiro's, as usual, terrified, but despite every bone in his body telling him to stay here, this is the harder choice to make because it's the right one. He'll do it scared, but he'll do it. And finally, there's Kyoko. It's true that her father wanted to keep them all safe in here, but even if she doesn't know her father, she knows that he wouldn't want them to abandon Makoto, especially if it means giving into despair. She turns to Makoto and says that by fate or design, he might not be here because of some simple luck. He came here to take down the ultimate despair. If that's the case, shouldn't they be calling him the ultimate hope? Junko hates this and tries to shut out Makoto with noise, but he's able to shut her down, refusing to give up and give in to despair. After all, if there's anything interesting about him, it's his relentless optimism, his hope, right? Everyone votes to punish Junko. And she can't believe it. The plan she spent 2 years with the sister she murdered ending because of one boy's refusal to give in to despair. It feels amazing. What, did you think she was going to be a hypocrite? This is her despair. All that time wasted, her literally bringing the world to an end, and her plan to broadcast a message of despair turned into a message of hope that others will likely follow. How could she not enjoy it? After a lifetime of boredom, Junko finally gets the taste of despair of having her elaborate plan come crashing down before paying for it with her life. Some have argued that this was what she was really after, and I'm not surprised they think that. Before she goes off to die, though, she warns the remaining students that after this point, despair will follow them everywhere. Every bit of hope they find will culminate into a greater despair when it, in her own view, is inevitably lost. For Junko Enoshima, the Blackened, the killer of Mukuro Ikusaba and the Headmaster, the indirect killer of 9 others, it's punishment time. It's all of them. Every execution Monokuma gave, Junko takes them all. It's not clear if they were somehow put on a less fatal setting or if this is just at least semi-symbolic, but regardless, it ends the same way as every other punishment. An emergency switch is shown on the ground and the chapter ends. But we still have an epilogue to get through. Just as Junko said, the air purifier switched off. Making their way to the main hall, the remaining 6 stand in front of that giant's door. They worry it might be a trap, but they don't have many options, do they? Oh hi Toko, we can leave. Everyone worries about what's on the other side of that door. Was it all a lie, or did the world really end? And if it did end, what should they do? Makoto says that regardless, it's still their world. They can't stay in school forever. Makoto acknowledges that as big as the world is, despair will inevitably exist. But by that same metric, so will hope. Kyoko suggests that the sheer act of searching for hope is a kind of hope itself. Just like any graduating class, the survivors don't plan on sticking together. Well, Toko plans on sticking to Byakuya, who plans on running far away from her, but he also plans to find those who are still hopeful and rebuild the Togami Empire from the ground up. Awie's first priority is finding a donut shop, and if they're all destroyed, finding some flour or straight up growing some wheat to make the damn things. Hiro thinks she's being metaphorical when, let's face it, she's not, and takes this to mean building your own road if there isn't one laid out for you. He doesn't know what he'll do, but his hope is finding that out. Kyoko's more vague about what she's going to do, simply saying that if she has people like Makoto around, she can keep going. She wants to have some kind of impact on the world. Despite this being goodbye, they say they should stay in touch, and they should reach out to each other if they need anything. Makoto pushes the button, unlocking the door. Does that door lead to hope? To despair? To both? They don't know, and neither do we. But it opens regardless. And then there's like this weird post-credit scene of Monokuma reiterating that he is no mere teddy bear, that he's a school's headmaster, and what I think is sequel bait, which is so weird considering the team initially wasn't planning on any sequels. I don't know why this is here. But regardless of my feelings on that, this is the end of Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc. I'm excited to get into my overall feelings on this final case, as well as talking about this game as a whole, but I'm gonna shelve those for now. This video is about fixing the game after all, and while the issues aren't egregious, the trial is not perfect. For a quick and easy one, let's change Haneko's motive for holding on to hope. I like her going with whatever's more interesting, so let's use that. Remember, in my version, she's the ultimate blogger, specifically one driven by curiosity rather than some sacred duty to educate the masses or something. She could say something like, who would I be if I chose to be locked in here forever when I can witness the end of the world with my own eyes? Oh, but no matter what, Glasses Boy is to come along with us. I'd never hear the end of it from her if we left him behind. Moving on, I don't know if they decided that Jill kept her memories last minute or what, but there are some inconsistencies in her behavior in this trial and the rest of the game that doesn't make sense considering they called her out to confirm the tragedy actually happened. As funny as it is, her shouting "who the hell are you" at Junko is strange. She knows who Junko is. She's her classmates. We even see her in one of the photos, and based on how no one's reacting to this, we can assume everyone's just used to Jill by this point in time. I don't think erasing her memory is necessary for killing this inconsistency. I actually think using a character with DID in this way is really cool. We just need to make sure that all of her behavior lines up. For the most part, it does. When she's first introduced, she's immediately casual with everyone, even referring to Makoto as Big Mac like they're on that kind of basis. She gives a lot of the cast nicknames throughout the game, calling Chihiro Cherry and Taka TikTok. She uses nicknames in the original Japanese too, so this character quirk could be seen as foreshadowing. She's acting familiar with them because she is familiar with them. The only place this falls apart is with Byakuya, funny enough. She initially refers to him as Lowly Cur, only to gain the same crush on him as her alter, referring to him as the adorable glasses man. Considering I've already decided to cut her crush on Byakuya in this version, that's not too much of an issue. She can just refer to him as some other nickname and it'll fly under the radar. Hell, we can even steal from the English version and have her sarcastically refer to him as White Knight while Togo's genuine when she says it, because that's literally what the name Byakuya means. Speaking of her memories and Byakuya, remember how he said one of the reasons I'd give for Hanako personally stalking him would be something spoilery? Here's the reason. She'd be wondering why he's back to being such an ass. It's heavily implied that while Byakuya never stopped being Byakuya, by the time his memories got wiped, he actually did make friends with his classmates. Instead of the Lowly Cur line, Hanako could wonder why he's acting like that, saying something like, "Geez, who pissed you off this morning in the trial?" And in a moment it would make perfect sense, only for her to keep saying similar things to him throughout the game. She's genuinely confused why the class's favorite jerk is back to being a genuine jerk. God, that was a lot more of Jill than I expected. Anyway, about Makoto's brain fog moments earlier. Makoto was initially the one to prove that they all had amnesia, and now he's shocked that an event happened during a gap in his memories. Hell, the previous evidence proves that they spent at least some time taking classes before all hell broke loose. While there's a couple ways to fix this, sometimes simple is best. Have Hanako be vague about how long ago this tragedy was during her explanation, and once Junko drops her line about the world ending a year ago, have Makoto express doubt or shock that a minimum of an entire year has passed. If you go for doubt, sure, they know they have amnesia, but if you woke up right now and were told you lost a year of your life and you still recognize yourself in a mirror, would you be able to believe it? If you go for simple shock, Makoto can say something like, "Just how much time did you take from us?" At which Junko can drop the 2 years bombshell. And here we come to your guys' suggestions. There wasn't a lot of talk, honestly, about the final trial specifically. There were some people saying how much they wanted someone else to be the mastermind, but that's not necessarily something I wanted to change. But there's been one element of this game, one character, that since the second video people have been giving suggestions for. An anomaly in the cast who technically does their job, for better and for worse. I touched on some rewrites back in Chapter 3 where he played a decent enough role to talk about, but welcome back to the stage, Yasuhiro! People have a lot of opinions about you! You've all definitely noticed that I haven't really touched on Hiro outside of Chapter 3 despite being such an infamous character, and ultimately that's because he very rarely does anything wrong. Hiro is a dumbass and can be annoying, and everyone questions how the hell he made it to the end, but that's ultimately the point. It's supposed to be a miracle that he's alive at all. From a Watsonian perspective, it makes sense. He's too much of a coward to kill, and while he'd make an easy target, it's wiser to kill someone smart and leave the others alive to investigate. But it's still a shock and disappointment to see him alive and well by the end, especially if your favorite character didn't make it. At the beginning of this whole project, I chose to simply ignore Hiro. I initially despised him, not seeing the appeal at all for those who did like him, and as a result, I didn't want to deal with him, period. But as I replayed the game for this project, I realized I actually found him kind of funny, and he provided a few more contributions than I initially gave him credit for, especially in Chapter 3. As a result, in my initial script, I don't bring him up really at all. But I want to give it an honest try before we end this. The biggest contributors to this rewrite are Bunny89, who commented back on Chapter 4, and My Brain's Basement F7T, namely their comment I showcased for their rewrites of Chapter 3. The rewrites I made using their comment would be the jumping off point for this, with Hiro having formed a bond with Taka in an older and younger brother dynamic, only to lose him. In that same rewrite, I have Hiro being down that he was unable to turn up anything useful during his investigation, leading to there being an emphasis on the evidence that Hiro is directly attached to, proving he did turn up useful evidence. This actually blends nicely with the start of Bunny89's comment, who brainstormed a moment at the beginning of Chapter 5's trial where the class goes over Hiro's contributions throughout the game to prove to himself and the audience that he deserves to be one of the survivors. This puts the moment 2 chapters earlier, but I think that gives this man time to cook. This would put Hiro in a position where he put in the work, and it paid off. He now knows that even when he doesn't think he's contributing much, he might be contributing something. He just needs to try. Now, I don't think his role in Chapter 4 should change. That chapter is legendary, and he's taking the situation seriously enough that he's an active participant in it. And while his actions in this chapter are awful, they're no worse than the Fukawas or Byakuya, and he's self-aware enough about this that at the end of the chapter, he point-blank says that Aoi shouldn't be held accountable for being manipulated during a death game by the mastermind. Chapter 5 is when we run into the main problem, and by problem, I mean claiming that a girl standing right there in front of you is actually a ghost and refusing to accept any other explanation. Bunny89 is right saying that while it's in character for Makoto to humor this, Byakuya or Toko would have straight up told Makoto to ignore him. What's worse, this infamous trial starter can't simply be chopped off because of how important the pieces of evidence are. The first part of the trial is, yes, probably there to alleviate the tension, but it's also there to make the physical description of Mukuro stick. Yes, we got the truth bullets about her tattoo and fake nails, the latter being more proof that Mukuro was disguised as Junko, which I forgot to mention in the video proper, whoops. But what's more likely to make that stick by the time of Chapter 6's trial? A quick choose the evidence portion of the trial where everyone already agrees on the answer, or a non-stop debate? This is very much a stick with me kind of thing, just hear me out. Hiro still claims that the body isn't Mukuro's. Hiro still forces us to bring up the evidence we do at the beginning of the trial, minus Kyoko's stuff, but honestly that's so specifically about Kyoko's character that you're probably going to remember it anyway. But here's the difference. He doesn't know whose body they found, but he's convinced, for some odd reason he can't quite pin down, that it isn't Mukuro. Byakuya and Kyoko don't immediately tell him to shut up because the body isn't Mukuro isn't something you shut down nearly as quickly as the body is Kyoko, who is literally standing right there. The evidence is brought forth. It is Mukuro Ikusaba, and Hiro relents. But before we move on, Byakuya, who probably is just as pissed about the time waster as he is in the original game, demands an explanation for why he was so stubborn about this. Hiro admits that it's just a gut feeling that's still bothering him about the body. But they can't pause the trial for every gut feeling, especially if it goes nowhere, so the class moves on. But Hiro's still bothered. He's decently locked in during the rest of the trial, not contributing the most, but putting in more work now that the cast is so reduced. But when the trial abruptly ends, he feels like something's off again. I'm ripping directly from Bunny89's comment here. In both versions, he says, "Hey guys, doesn't this seem too perfect? Like it's all been preordained or something." This entire trial from the very beginning has felt wrong to him. He just doesn't know why. He can't put up much of a fight, and he likely still voted for Makoto/Kyoko because the evidence pointed that way, but something is very wrong here. Chapter 6 kicks in, and he's still just as gullible as a large portion of the cast. The photo tricks him, he doesn't want to believe he has amnesia, and he doesn't figure out that Mukuro's body was someone else's, but once Makoto states that Junko was always Mukuro, he adds to the evidence. Hey, the train dude 48. Yeah, I'm calling you out, come to the front. If you're watching this, do you remember a certain comment you left in last video about a detail that bothered you? One that I'd never seen anyone, not fans, not Let's Players, not the game itself point out, but is so obviously there? One I straight up said I didn't have a good rewrite for without leaving all the characters looking like morons and having it be more for the player's sake? Thank you for leaving this comment. The moment Makoto says Mukuro had been disguised as Junko from the very beginning, unlike the original where Hiro is just as shocked as everyone else, Hiro would point out that Mukuro being Junko makes so much sense. He knew the one killed in the garden wasn't Mukuro, at least not in the way he thought. He knew those boots looked familiar. Yeah, so Traindude pointed out that Mukuro's boots are visible in the body's art, and even after being blown up, they're still clearly laced up calf-high boots, something only Junko wore, and literally no one in the class noticed this. They noticed the fake nails, but not the, to be blunt, loud as fuck boots that their dead classmate wore. I won't hold it against them too much, considering that would involve remembering details about a girl who died weeks ago when they've had a whole bunch of other stuff going on, but that would make this moment, where Hiro reveals that he did notice, he just didn't know what he was noticing, hit so much harder, especially considering from what I've seen, there's a high chance that you, the player, didn't notice this either. This would make his declaration in the final trial when Makoto snaps him out of despair hit so much harder. The whole fortune-telling thing doesn't matter anymore. What matters is my own gut feelings. Because his gut feelings have been right. He felt that Taka needed a friend and it was working until he was murdered. He felt there was something off with the body in the garden and he was right. He felt that the 5th trial was rigged and sure enough it was. Like I said, he doesn't know what he's gonna do now that they've escaped, but he'll trust his instincts and figure it out from there. He won't always be listened to, but the important thing is that he trusts himself. God, I wish I'd actually cared about him more while writing the original script now. Yasuhiro Hagakure was the final part of this rewrite that was bugging me. The only part that you guys seem to consistently agree needed to be dealt with for the final trial, and I am so happy that I figured this out before the end. So, what did I think about the plot twist? What did I think about what the story ultimately ended up being? Considering I usually find it cheap when the secret big bad is someone we've never been introduced to, I think the real Junko being the mastermind was perfect for where the story was at this point. By the time you get to the final trial, it's unlikely that one of the survivors is the mastermind. There's still that worry that one of them might be in on it though. And while a lot of fans have admitted that they expected Yasuhiro to be revealed to be the mastermind, I think it was for the best that it was someone we'd never met and her co-conspirator had been dead for like 2 weeks. Because honestly, by this point, learning that any of our survivors had been the mastermind this whole time would have been cheap. A plot twist for the sake of shocking and upsetting everyone, and that's it. It's interesting for 2 seconds and then you feel cheated out of what was once a more interesting character. But they still managed to fit in a little bit of that sense of betrayal via Mukuro. I like that we knew her before she died. As Aoi says upon the revelation, we had normal conversations with her. If you do her FTEs, even on a replay, you don't get the impression of someone lying through their teeth. If anything, Mukuro gives off the impression of someone who's free to say what she wants because she's disguised as someone else. She admits in her last FTE that she's been pursuing the same goal since she was a kid. But recently that's changed. She wants to do more with her life. She wants to see more possibilities. She wants to grow. In other words, she hoped. She hopes for something more than the despair that Junko preached. It's strange going back through and knowing who she is, and wondering if Junko wasn't completely honest about why she killed her sister. I also like the cruelty of the class having amnesia. Sure, the fact that they had amnesia could have been seen a mile away, but that doesn't make it a bad twist. But it still feels like what that actually means is further explored in this final trial. Before, we had a few photos of a handful of already dead students, but put them together with the group photos, and it makes what was lost clearer. The cruelty of this reveal is how much it explains in retrospect and what it implies. There's the little things, like how during Chihiro's introduction, he felt like he had met Makoto before. But, for example, as he lay dying, why did Hifumi know Celeste's real name? Simple. She told him. At some point, she trusted him enough to tell him, and possibly everyone else. Even if she still preferred being Celeste, she was still willing to say that Taiko Yasuhiro existed too. How did Monokuma know their secrets for the second trial motive? It's because at some point they all confided in Junko or Mukuro or all of them as friends. They trusted them, cared about them, and this is what they get in return. Being trapped in a building they agreed to stay in, killing the ones they'd called friends for 2 years to get out. Killing each other to return to friends, to family, to places that likely aren't there anymore. I'll admit I'd probably change the sight of the outside world. I'm not sure how much of the world building was rattling around in Kodaka's brain before he got the chance to canonize it, but regardless, this is really silly. Like, a kaiju Monokuma, really? I think a lot of us burst out laughing when we first saw this. You'd have to lay some serious groundwork, like, I don't know, just off the top of the head, explicitly saying some deranged billionaire CEO's kid made it under the guise of security, but in reality it was meant to spread despair or something, for me to look at this and go, yeah, I totally believe that the world ended in this way. Strangely enough, I'm not against the Monokuma helmets. This could easily be a cult or something, and it proves that the ultimate despair had major influence beyond this school. I've seen a handful of people complain about how purposefully vague the tragedy is, but I like to argue in the vagueness' favor. As Junko herself says, what good would knowing all the details of how she brought the world to ruin do? Would it actually be satisfying, or would it just be a footnote in what is already essentially a 2-hour villain monologue? Besides, before getting additional material, you can come up with some small theories on your own. You might have forgotten in all the chaos, but that bloody classroom is still there, and it never got an official confirmation for what it is in-game. There's the vague assumption that it's the tragedy, but that's all we got, and that's technically not even confirmed. But you can make a couple solid theories. You can make a good case for there being a slaughter in the school, long before the killing game, possibly instigated by the Despair Sisters, possibly exposed by them. Maybe word got out, maybe that slaughter, that tragedy if you will, was that first spark that made Junko realize that people fall into despair when they see the hope of the future die horribly. Or maybe it was her test run, or maybe she did it just because she was bored. Then, as she said, the despair spread, a contagion. Maybe there were copycat killers in other high-end schools. Maybe the closing of such a well-respected institution with literal confidential documents chilling in its library caused a domino effect of economic crashes and political scandals. Nothing's confirmed in this game, but that doesn't mean nothing was said. I like the fact that in this entry we aren't explicitly told what happens. I don't mind that it's explored a bit more in later entries. Hell, the very next two go into explicit detail about some things that set off the tragedy. But for now, the most important part is the fact that despair is contagious. That fact doubles as the reason this whole thing is happening. Junko wanted to kill the world's hope, both figuratively and literally. Sorry if you were hoping for a vicious takedown of the hope versus despair philosophy. This video was, and from the beginning always was, whether I could tell the story that Kazutaka Kodaka wanted to tell after reworking some story elements. And the story that he wanted to tell was a story about hope and despair. While my personal philosophy is more aligned with later entries in the series, the specific philosophy here is one I think he pulled off well. As with anything even vaguely philosophical, what Kodaka specifically was trying to do when making a game about hope and despair has been debated within the fandom, when they're not fighting about whether it's a premise even worth exploring in the first place. So everything I'm about to say is my personal take on things. Shocker. I think that in order to talk about the game's main theme, we need to talk about other themes in this game. Kodaka's gone on record saying that while he wasn't inspired by it, Danganronpa does share a theme with the Japanese classic Battle Royale, which, for the sake of exactly one person I know for a fact is watching this video, I will remind was a well-written critique on the Japanese school environment which pits students against each other, encouraging them to step on each other to succeed. And then its adaptations varied in their success in showing that message. The Killing Game is, as Celeste says, a zero-sum game. These students, initially thinking themselves around 15 or 16 minus Hero, are placed in a situation by their headmaster where they're simultaneously encouraged to step on others to get what they want, and are punished if they are caught doing so. This arrangement isn't exactly great for anyone's psyche. And while I can't exactly go on record for any country's educational culture except for my own, there's a reason there's so much Japanese media critiquing it. Danganronpa is another piece of Japanese media doing that, and it makes sense. While there are rumors that Saika and Leon were killed off first for less than pragmatic reasons, in-game it does serve a thematic purpose. Saika worked hard for the life she has, and she was determined to save that life no matter what. Leon, by contrast, is naturally gifted and resents his talent. It's only in the post-game, in a non-canon setting, where he gets the chance to reflect and consider the idea that he misses the thrill of the game. He doesn't work hard, he doesn't care, but he's gifted nonetheless. Both of these gifted kids, exceptional in their fields, were pitted against each other, and despite being so different, both of them died. Their talents did not save them from what the killing game did to their minds. It broke them both. Danganronpa shows how the pressure that comes with being in such a competitive environment can break even the most gifted, the most talented people out there. In fact, it shows how being talented can make it worse. I'm not about to go into everyone's FTEs, but most of them add to this idea that these characters are so much more and could be so much more if only they thought they were allowed to be. Some are terrified about keeping up their talents after high school, and others feel like they have to keep going regardless of their feelings towards it. But we can't exactly blame society for everything bad that happened to them, can we? Because unlike Battle Royale, the school system isn't the one telling them to literally kill each other, are they? Junko is meant to be pure evil. Kadaka has made that very clear in several interviews, and I think that's for the best. Because in this game, she exists to be one thing: despair. But considering how many times that's been said in this game, the words probably lost some meaning, so what exactly does that mean? Well, I think it comes down to that final vote. Junko gives everyone the option to vote for hope, to go out into the outside world where terrors might await them, or to just stay in school forever. That's what despair is. No killing, just stagnation. Until the day they die. Or to put it another way, she gives them the option to not graduate, to just stay as they are in this moment, to give up on hope, to not bother looking for that light in the darkness. In Japan, high school starts at around 15 or 16, and Hope's Peak Scout students already in high school. Add 2 years for the time jump, and every one of the students are adults. Junko's asking them to give up and not move forward, to not graduate, to not enter adulthood and all the messy, terrifying things that come with it. She has that nihilism, that despair that tells you to just give up, that nothing can get better and that it's better to just quit moving forward because it only gets worse from here. Because yeah, as a 25-year-old, I can attest to the fact that even when you have a support system, graduating feels like the end of something. Graduating high school, or hell, graduating college was terrifying. Like, I'd been on training wheels for my whole life and they were taken off overnight. And maybe it's because I was raised with the ability to immediately see international events upon waking up, but the idea of having to be an adult in a world where things can just happen sounds a whole lot like walking straight into an apocalyptic wasteland. But as Makoto pointed out, apocalypse or not, this is still my world. To live in it, to survive in it, you have to hope for the better. Otherwise, you hide away. You give into the despair of it all, and the people and events spreading said despair can go unopposed. And I think that's fundamentally the lesson that Danganronpa is trying to teach. Despair is everywhere, but so is hope. If hope can feed despair, then can't despair feed hope? Do you really just have to accept that the terrible things can literally be baked into the culture you're raised in? Makoto never gave in, not only to despair, but to the competitive nature of the game. Time and time again, he pointed out that they're killing each other because Monokuma's forcing them to, and time again, he declared that they were going to team up and unite against a common enemy. He had to play the game a little to survive. We all do. but he never let it consume him. And in the end, he didn't let it consume his surviving friends either. That's the attitude that, even when the game itself tried to get rid of him, helped him survive. And that's the attitude he's carrying out into the outside world, and it's what the game says we should carry too. Because even when the world pits us against each other, whether it be in the workplace, or across class lines, or ethnicity, or nationality, or high school, we can still play outside of the system's rules and hope to change things. Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc is messy. It does a lot of things wrong, both morally and practically. But the fundamental lesson about hoping beyond hope, even when things seem like absolute hell, is a good one in my eyes. It's not just about being optimistic, it's acknowledging that things are gonna be terrible sometimes. There's gonna be a lot of struggling. A lot of friends lost, but whether it's out of spite or simply because it's better than doing nothing, you go into tomorrow anyway, and the day after that, and the day after that. And the next thing you know, weeks or months or years have passed, and guess what? You're still here. And maybe a lot of the broad things are still shitty. The world might still be in an apocalyptic state. But yesterday you had a good time with your friends. Or maybe you saved someone from getting hit by a car. Or maybe that 1 year-long boycott finally got results. Or maybe you had a really good donut. Either way, something good happened, so might as well keep going to see what other good things happen, right? And in my opinion, there's nothing I need to change about that. It's done. It's freaking done! I had a lot of fun making this, and if this does well, or I just wanna, I'd like to make more of these fixing videos in the future. I'm not sure that I'd immediately jump into Danganronpa 2. The idea of fixing that one's chapter 3 haunts my nightmares, but if enough people want it, I'll deliver. And with that, I think it's time I bid you all adieu. I'm gonna go ice my jaw after all that talking. I'll see you in a bit, media lovers.